Hey, it's Matt Goronsky here again, talking about navigating the changing voice. That's our topic that we're going to talk about today. How do we navigate the changing voice? Now, this is a complex topic. It depends on your teaching context. Believe it or not, all of our voices are changing all of the time. This isn't just a middle school or high school issue for choir directors, but this is kind of an issue all of the time. All of our voices, including myself, yourself, our voices are changing. Now, to be fair, there's a period of evolution in the voice that is most pronounced during obviously middle school and high school. And I want to talk about some specific strategies that we can use as choir directors, and also a way to kind of understand this context when we're talking about navigating the changing voice. Now, how do we cultivate confident singers in the midst of navigating the changing voice? Now, I like to think of this specifically the male changing voice in terms of vocal gravity. And to be honest, I've never heard this concept before. This is just based off of my own research, my own anecdotal research, teaching students in choirs from elementary through high school through adult choirs. And I've never heard this explained this way, but to me it makes a lot of sense. Especially, the main choirs that I teach are middle school choirs, and dealing with so many male changing voices. Being a male choir director myself, I think this is a helpful way to explain this to our own students, and I will explain a briefer version to my own students. So, what is vocal gravity? This is an idea that I've come up with to describe how the voice changes. Now, a good way to understand this idea of gravity in general is to use, and I'll explain this sometimes with my students, is the one of my favorite movies, Interstellar. And if you've ever seen the movie Interstellar, it is my all-time favorite movie, and I could defend it. I'm going to be specific here. I love the movie Interstellar because, and it probably is, it might be my favorite movie of all time. It has my favorite soundtrack to a movie of all time. I know it's a hot take, but Hans Zimmer, the entire score, it's so moving. And if you've ever heard them, talking about how the thought that they put into creating the score and everything is just brilliant. The movie, the story, it's awesome. I love Interstellar, but there's specifically, and you could see it here. There's this scene in Interstellar, and this is a picture from that scene. And if you've never seen the movie before, long story short, it's this post-apocalyptic scenario on Earth where Earth is dying, and it's called Interstellar. They're trying to find another planet to basically move humanity to, and they find the specific planet, and this is the picture here. And when they get to the planet, the issue is, in the movie, I believe that the planet is too close to a black hole, and this is impacting gravity on the planet. That's what we're talking about when it comes to vocal gravity. And I think it's that every hour that they're on the planet is, I believe it's 7 years of time on Earth, something like that, some crazy scenario. I don't want to give it away if you've never seen the movie, but long story short, things don't go the way they should. And there's this scene in Interstellar where he comes back to the ship, and after things don't go as planned, and it's one of my favorite scenes in all of in all of cinema, if you want to call it that, where this is Matthew McConaughey, who's one of the astronauts, and he's watching a video of his children who are now grown up. And as a father, it's like, oh my goodness, it's just it pulls on all the heartstrings about kids who grow up too fast and things like that. But I love this movie because it really takes a really cool scientific approach to this idea of gravity. And there's a lot of things about gravity that, scientists still don't understand. Similarly, there's a lot of things about vocal gravity that a lot of us don't understand, or about the changing voice. And when it comes to vocal gravity, I like to use this term because what is gravity is this pulling into into a large mass, right? So if our gravity on Earth is created because this huge mass that is Earth, and we are being pulled into the center of the Earth. That's just a crude summary of it, and I I like to talk about the male changing voice in terms of vocal gravity because I think it's a good way of describing if you've ever heard enough male singers who are in the middle of that big vocal change, you can hear that some of them have a stronger sense of gravity than other singers. Where maybe we all have those vocalists in our ensembles who maybe have like just a few notes, like 2 or 3 notes is their vocal range, unfortunately. And how do we deal with this? And when I tell my students about this idea of vocal gravity, I like to explain it in that your gravity on your planet, it's temporary. It's constantly changing. And just because sometimes I think, especially if you were to put yourself into the mindset of someone who's in the middle of going through this vocal change, and they're struggling, like a lot of these singers, they don't even a lot of them don't even know if they're singing the right or wrong notes. But there is a lot of them who do know, like, oh man, I'm not matching pitch. I can only sing these 2 or 3 notes. I have these grumble bass tones that I'm singing. And what helps is to explain to them, hey, your vocal gravity right now, it's very strong. You have this intense gravity towards your modal pitch or your speaking voice. But the good news is the vocal planet that you live on right now, it's not always going to have the same gravity. Your gravity right now, it's an interstellar. You happen to be close to that black hole, and it's really just pulling in your voice towards your speaking, your modal pitch, your speaking voice. It's really pulling that in very strongly right now. But it's not always going to be like that. Over time, it's going to change, right? So the range is constantly changing, and success is relative. So when it comes to vocal gravity, what I mean by success is relative, if someone has a 3 or 4 note vocal range, can they consistently produce accurately those 3 or 4 notes? That might be an A plus vocalization for them because they only have 3 or 4 notes that they can sing. Whereas, maybe your soprano who's got like, 3 or 4 octaves or whatever it is that she can sing, the definition of success, it needs to be dependent on the vocal range, right? And we need to be sensitive of that. And, there's been a lot of ways that I've been trying to, I think, one of the big things that helps, especially timid singers who are in the middle of a vocal change, is for them to understand it won't always have to be like this. But what it does take is if you were on a planet that had a tremendous force of gravity, it's going to take a lot more effort for you to maybe take steps, to take vocal steps. You see where I'm going here with this vocal gravity idea? It's going to take a tremendous more amount of breath support and effort and exertion to raise, to get up off of those lower notes that are really sucking you in through that vocal gravity. So success is definitely relative. And enthusiastic praise can be such a game changer when it comes to the changing voice in our choir settings. Like, it's a strange thing to think about, but it is totally possible to get really excited with our choirs, with our basses, tenors, whoever it is who's in the middle of a vocal change, and be like, hey, I heard you. It wasn't great, but you know what? You were only singing, just about a month ago, you had about like a 2 or 3 note range. And now we're going into a 3 or 4 note range. You're making improvements. I heard how you were able to really, we have to be enthusiastic about the small wins, because if our students, especially our male vocalists, are in the middle of this confusing time where their voice is changing and they're insecure about that, if we aren't giving them praise, then they're just going to assume like, oh, what's the point? I can't do it. I can't, my vocal gravity, it's too much. I can't fight it. when we can. So I like explaining this to my students, maybe because I'm a little geeky and I love Interstellar, but I like this idea of vocal gravity because I remember, and it's anyone. Like if you're doing a vocal warm up, and maybe you're early in the morning. Like to me, like in the morning, I'm a bass. Later on the day, I'm more like a tenor, right? But if you're, let's say you're in the morning and you haven't warmed up, you notice that like there's this reluctance to go higher in your vocal range, right? This is one of the reasons we have vocal warm-ups, right? Obvious common sense, but this is on a larger scale when it comes to the, specifically the male changing voice about that vocal gravity. So it's a good way to explain to our singers when it comes to the changing voices to talk about this vocal gravity concept. Now, we previously talked about culture, how the culture in our ensembles has a big impact on like growing our program and retention and recruitment, all of that. The culture of our program is so important. And it's the same thing when it comes to, the changing voice. And this is something that I mentioned previously about our point challenge. And what I love about the point challenge when it comes to specifically the changing voice is I like to use this point challenge as a motivational tool. And just a quick summary of it. I'll do this point challenge pretty much every rehearsal with my choirs. I think it works really well on the, I would say, elementary through early high school range. I use this pretty much every day with my middle school choirs, and every rehearsal, at the end of the rehearsal, one section will get the point of the day. Now you could do it however, you could split it up by rows, you could split it up by sections. I like to do it in sections because especially when we're reviewing repertoire or we're doing a sight reading example, I will make this competitive, and one section, I'll keep score throughout the class. So let's say, the score right now is everyone is tied at 4 points. And I usually try and keep it close just to keep it competitive. And as we get towards the end of the class, there'll be one winner. So let's say we were tied at 4 and it's, there's 2 minutes left. Maybe we'll do a rhythm rumbler, which I'm going to show you in a second, where the students will do some kind of a sight reading activity. And I will decide, oh, you know what? It was the altos. The altos were the best in that performance. They get the final point, and that means the altos get the point of the day. And I will display this, and I leave it on our whiteboard in our class, and I will leave that up so the students can see. And the students will remind me sometimes if I forget to put up the score, or they'll ask me, about the point challenge. It's a great motivational tool to keep our choirs engaged. Now, specifically about the changing voice, what I like about it is for students who are struggling in the middle of a changing voice, having an external competition motivates them to try and do well, outside of, oh, I need to sing so that I get a good grade. But like, I'm a part of a team here, and I know I only have a 3 or 4 note range, but I'm going to try my best to contribute to my section, to really, push them. Because again, if we're talking about that vocal gravity idea, if the vocal gravity for a male changing voice who's in the middle of that changing period where they only have a select note of a vocal range, it's going to take more effort to push them beyond that vocal range in a healthy way. And I think that just using a daily point challenge is a great way to do it. Competition can be good. We can redeem the overly critical negative pop culture narrative when it comes to, singing. You don't have to be some pop star to be a quote unquote good singer. You can sing together in a choir and challenge yourself to improve, because success is relative, especially when it comes to the changing voice. All right, so this one is one of my favorite tools specifically for the changing voice. This is something that I discovered during COVID. And man, we all have, I'm sure, tons of stories to go over about our times during COVID. Or singing with masks was especially an issue. We were starting to go back in person. Everyone had their masks, and we were all spread apart. And it was difficult to tell if students were singing. And by and large, you can kind of tell when some students who were wearing a mask were singing and weren't. And I wanted a way to keep them accountable. And I found this this decibel meter basically. And what I like about it a lot is this decibel meter, and you can go to this link here, ulean.co/online-loudness-meter. And if you go to this link, it will bring up this decibel meter. And let me actually, I'm going to go to this link specifically. This is what it looks like when you load the website. And what I like about it is it doesn't require any download. There's no software. My students did it on their Chromebooks. We're one-to-one with Chromebooks in our school district. And what I like about it is, watch, I'm going to click Start Metering here. And you can see as I'm speaking, it's already showing me the decibel level, and it's also showing me the average decibel level, which is super, super helpful. Now watch, I'm going to click pause, so I can pause and stop the metering. And what I really paid attention to with my students is this average number, because again, when we're talking about the changing voice, if students are not actually using their voice in the middle of that vocal change, they're going to become, it can be, the snowball effect where they become, less and less confident, or they can become more and more confident depending on how they're actually using their voice. And what I've noticed especially is whatever we can do to encourage our students to project their voice, to actually use their voice, and to keep them accountable, I think this is a fantastic tool. So you can, now if I hit X, it's going to reset it as well. And notice this is just on this page here. Again, the URL, it's ulean.co/online-loudness-meter. Or if you just, even if you Google ulean.co loudness meter, it should bring you to this website. And it's just fantastic. I love, especially, I'm going to hit on pause here, I love the average. So what I would have my students do is we would rehearse, and I would have them leave their Chromebooks facing themselves. They're not on it. They're not using it with their hands. They just have it, either on their laps or close to them. At the time during COVID, we had it on our desks, and we were singing. And at the end of it, I would say I would go around and look at their average decibel. So I could pause it now, and it's going to show the average decibel that I was putting out. And I would tell them, like, hey, if we're singing right now, your decibel level should be either, between whatever I would choose for their Chromebooks. And it was a great way to keep students accountable. So when it comes to the changing voice, this is just another tool to keep students accountable, to get them, again, to use their voice, because the more they use it, the more confident they're going to be in the midst of that change. Now, here's another interesting take on this, and I'm going to show you. This is called Rhythm Rumbler. This is a program that I've created for 3 Minute Theory. It's included in every 3 Minute Theory subscription. And what I love about Rhythm Rumbler is I use it in a lot of different ways. So Rhythm Rumbler, I'll play the video that'll give a better description of it, but I use this with my choirs in particular, and I'll show you how in a second, but let's just watch the video that'll explain it better than me. Tired of searching online through random rhythm videos to use with your music class or ensemble? Well, the team at 3 Minute Theory is proud to announce the latest expansion to their interactive music education curriculum, Rhythm Rumbler. Rhythm Rumbler is an exciting new rhythm reading program that guides students through an organized collection of rhythm videos that naturally progress from basic to more complex rhythms. Students can clap along, sing, or play along on their preferred instrument while being challenged to not only follow the correct rhythm, but perform the corresponding dynamics. Students will love the challenge of Rhythm Rumbler, as each round increases the difficulty by speeding up the tempo. And every subscription to Rhythm Rumbler comes with a reproducible PDF of all the included examples. So sign up for a Rhythm Rumbler subscription today. All right, so you kind of get the hang of it, of what Rhythm Rumbler is. So it's a complete rhythm curriculum. It's 30 different examples. And what I like about it in particular is it's not just for clapping. The vision for this, and why we created it to go alongside the 3 Minute Theory curriculum included in it, is this is designed for ensembles. So choir, band, or orchestras, where they can use these rhythms to play them on their instruments. Notice I said on their instruments. So if you were in a band or orchestra, you can play these on, concert B flat scale, whatever, orchestra, let's play it on a D scale. What I like to do and is to start it on a clap. So let me go back in the video here just to kind of show you a little bit. Here we go. So let's say that this was, one of the examples. So the music is scrolling here. Notice you have the, the dynamics here below. The beats are written in. So what we'll do, because there's several different repetitions of the same 8-measure rhythm pattern, is each repetition of this 8-measure pattern will do something different. So we'll start it clapping. And then maybe the second rep, I'll, really say, hey, let's focus on the dynamics. I want to hear those dynamics in the clapping. And then what I like to do with my choirs specifically is I like to have us sing it, because it's an 8-measure pattern. I'll have us sing it on solfege. So the first measure will be do. So, do, 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 re, mi, rest, fa. So, and we'll keep going through a whole scale. And it's a great way to warm up. I use these as bell ringers in most cases. And I love them as bell ringers because it's an opposite of a vocal warm-up. And they don't even realize that they're doing a vocal warm-up. They're singing through a whole scale. They're looking at new rhythms. So it's working on so many different concepts at the same time. And of course, with all of these different bits of technology, it enables me to walk around the classroom, which is super helpful, just so that I can kind of walk around, see what's going on in my classroom, monitor student participation, which is so key, especially in the middle school realm, if you will. Now, how does this relate to the changing voice? Well, because they start with rhythm rumbler and clapping, they're already making a lot of noise. And I've noticed that when you increase the average decibel level, if you will, in a choir rehearsal, it makes them more inclined to sing louder too. There's already a good amount of volume that's in the room from our clapping or stomping or however you're performing these rhythms. Now we're going to sing it. And it's really been super helpful, especially with my male vocalists, who, if we were just to say, all right, everyone, let's sing, a scale, all right, Kodai hand signs, whatever you do, there's nothing wrong with that. But I've noticed a higher engagement when students are clapping and then singing, just as a little tip, especially when it comes to the changing voice. Now, also, when we're talking about the changing voice, we talked about this previously, being consistent in our instructional methods. And I think we need to be consistent. No, we definitely do need to be consistent, especially when it comes to the changing voice, because the reality is, the male changing voice is the most significant vocal change, but female voices are changing as well. And I wanted a way to show my students how their voices are changing, because what I do, and I think a lot of teachers do, is maybe you do some kind of a voice test. What I like to do is at the beginning of the year, I will voice test them to see where their modal pitch is, where their vocal range is. That obviously tells me what vocal section to put them in. But I also do it at the middle of the year, so after our winter concert, and I also do that at the end of the year. And I like doing that because it keeps a dialogue open about their voices that are changing throughout the year. And usually in those 3 different check-ins, it's my opportunity to give them praise for their voice and say, like, wow, that's great. You know what? I hear your voice. And specifically, I do this in smaller groups. I do it in about groups of 4 or 5 at a time. They'll come up to the piano while the class is doing. Usually I'll have them play some 3-minute theory games, which is awesome because they're specific, music education games on different topics, which is super helpful. And I'll have the class play those games while they're being competitive, trying to get the highest score. I'll voice test. And I'm not going into the specifics of how I do that, the notes that I write down, but basically I am able to tell my students, like, hey, you know what? I can tell that your range has really expanded, or, you know what? It sounds like your voice is starting to settle into this vocal range, and keeping that dialogue open with the students so that they are aware, like, oh, my voice is changing, and this isn't some weird thing. This is a part of being a vocalist. in the middle school or high school or whatever, age range they happen to be in. So being consistent in when it comes to the changing voice is super important. Now, how can we be consistent with the changing voice? This is an app I developed. I found someone. He's a German composer, if you will. He knows how to code and do all these different things. And I had consulted him about a year or two ago to create a solfege meter. And which was kind of like, how we have like tuning devices, like, I play guitar, and so I'll tune the guitar and I can see the meter if it's in tune or not. I wanted to do that with solfege. We developed a solfege meter. And the next iteration was I wanted my students to not just see the solfege that they were singing, but also to see the note on the musical staff. And so we developed this Note Namer app. It's available completely for free on my website. If you go to matthewgoronsky.com/note namer, just as one word, Note Namer. So matthewgoronsky.com/note namer. And I'm going to go there right now. Now, it might operate a little bit differently, but what's really cool is, and so one, you want to download, this is so cool. You could download the free Note Namer Google form that you can use with your own students. And what I love about this Google form is you can use this Google form. And what I'm planning on doing with my own students is you could use this Google form to have students do this activity completely by themselves. So they are filling out the Google form as they use the Note Namer, and it should work. It probably will work better, obviously, if it's some kind of external like USB mic, but it should work. I can use it on my laptop, and I'm planning on having my students use it on their Chromebooks. And I just want to show you the Note Namer like questionnaire that I'm going to use with my students. And let's see here. Okay, so this is the actual Google form. Now, notice it says, before using Note Namer, if you had to guess which vocal part do you think fits your voice best, they can select whatever part that they think they are, or if they're not sure. And it has the link here built into the Google form. So click the start button on the Note Namer and start experimenting by making different sounds. What exactly is Note Namer showing you? And so let's answer that right now. So I'm in Note Namer, and let me just show you this. I'm going to click the start button here in Note Namer. And as I'm talking, you can already see that notes are coming on the screen. But, before I do that, here, you can see there's a little keyboard here that'll play bass notes. And let me put on my sound a little bit. Okay, so do. So now, let's scroll back up. Do, re, do, mi, sol, fa, mi, do, mi, sol, la, ti, do. Okay, now it's a little off because my mic is being recorded and things like that. But what's really cool is you can select the mode. So you can choose between diatonic and chromatic. So if I wanted to, show accidentals, so do, di, re, re, mi. So you could see that it's showing the accidentals, and we have them only as flats, the accidentals written in. I prefer to use the diatonic. You can even select whatever key you're in. So if I was in, let's go to E major here, and I'm going to play an E bass note. Do, re, mi, do, sol, la, ti, do. And you can also see that the little circle, watch, do, it spins faster and it changes color based off of the dynamic that you're singing, which is super, super cool. And this is all, it's available completely for free, matthewgoronsky.com/note namer. And now also what I'm planning on doing with my own students, you can see as I'm talking, it's flickering all these different notes because it's picking up the different frequencies as I speak. Now, what I'm going to have, and this is actually built in on the Google form. Let's pull this back up here. So it's going to say, next, very slowly say the lyrics without singing to Happy Birthday. And as you say these lyrics, try and estimate the average note that the note namer is displaying as you slowly say these lyrics. Please enter your average note below. And so they're going to select this. And so watch, I'm going to do that myself here. I'm going to say, Happy birthday to you. Now, I would say that it looks like I'm probably on a B or C below middle C, okay, on average, which is like around my speaking voice as I'm slowly saying happy birthday. Now, what is so cool about this is it's showing students that they are not just put into their vocal section just because we arbitrarily think, oh, you're a soprano, you're an alto, or you're a tenor, you're a bass. But we are showing them, we can now say, okay, you found that this average note, this is what your voice is producing on average. Well, guess what? You happen to be in the alto section and you selected that your average speaking voice was the A below middle C. And you're in the soprano and your average speaking voice was around middle C. Notice how your average modal pitch, your average speaking voice was slightly higher. That's one of the reasons why you're in the soprano, why you're in the alto. It helps them give them a more holistic approach to understanding their vocal range and to see this over time. So my goal is to have my students use this Note Namer app at the beginning of the year, the middle, and the end to correspond with my own voice assessments. And this way they are able to be more informed of how their voice is changing over time. So it's something I'm really excited about. And it's available completely for free on MatthewGronsky.com/notenamer as one word. And so, let's just wrap this up, real quick. And let's talk about how can we be, or I should say, how can we encourage confident vocal projection, especially when it comes to this difficult, time in the changing voice. So how do we encourage confident vocal projection? So let's start with one, identify the problem. This is why I like the Note Namer and the Decibel Meter app as well, is for a lot of students, they're just not projecting their voice loud enough to understand what their problem is, right? So if you have a student who's, like super airy, whispery, and doesn't have a clear tone in their vocal production, we could say, hey, you know what? You need to, your average decibel is this. And there's something about using technology as an external tool because our voice is it's personal. Like our voice is embedded in our body. And this makes it more, I would say, manageable in the sense that students don't have to worry about like, oh, well, my instrument is my body and it's my voice and I'm insecure about it. I totally get that. But when we use external tools and external meters to help us measure that, all of a sudden they're focusing less on themselves and they're focusing on, I want to make that number go up. Or if they're using Note Namer, I want to make the note go up. I can see the notes change as I sing and I want to see how high I can go on the staff, right? It's a motivation thing. So we want to identify the problem, whatever that is. And we want to minimize their insecurities is really what we're talking about in using these tools. And we want to find the right motivation. For some students, and a lot of students, unfortunately, they just don't care, right? And that's a sad reality because, it may be a majority of our students in our choir ensembles, they just don't care. And I think that's on us as choir directors if we believe that singing and choral music is as awesome as it really is, to our mind, body, soul of who we are, then we need to find things that are going to motivate our students. And that's one of the reasons why I've created so many of these different, technological tools to use in the choral setting is I want I want other choral directors to be able to reach their students, to motivate them, to remove these insecurities. And these are just other tools and ideas that can help that process because the real goal is to have fun, right? Is to have our students, to have those moments of like, whoa, that sounded so cool. Like, oh man, I was able to expand my vocal range and to become more confident, choir members. I also like to experiment with technique, and I have this little mask here. I teach, it's a sequence called the three different voices, and one of those voices is called the mask voice. And I know a lot of different, depending on where you studied, who you studied with, but you've probably heard of this idea of the mask voice. But I like focusing on the mask and making really ugly sounds, especially with my middle schoolers. You will take the quietest vocalist, when it comes to encouraging, confident vocal projection. This works really well with middle school boys, is to get them to make an ugly sound. Like middle school boys, they want to imitate ugly sounds. And so sometimes I'll say, good afternoon in their modal pitch, and I'll say, good morning in their head voice, and then I'll say good evening, and focusing on their mask voice, like a nasally sound, like good evening, because that sound tends to really resonate through the nasal cavity, and I like using that, and I'll have them repeat after me. And to experiment with this is a great way to get them to project their voice. I like to do this also in smaller sections. Is I will not tell them anything of what I'm trying to get them to do, but I'll say like, hey, I want you to imagine your friend is outside this classroom right now, like out on the other side of the wall. I just want you to just yell and get their attention. Like middle school boys, like, no problem, sure, Mr. G. And they'll, like, hey, I'll just have them say like, hey, like just yell it, like, to say, hey. And I show them that, oh, you know what? I didn't ask you to say it in a particular pitch, right? But I noticed that when you said hey really loud, all of a sudden you were saying it at a much higher pitch. And again, explaining that to them, especially when it comes to the changing voice, that you are able to reach those notes. You need to project your voice in order to reach those notes. And the way to reach those notes is to confidently project your voice. Because a lot of students skip that over. They just think like, oh, it's too high, I can't hit it. When they're not giving enough gas. If it's a car going up a hill, you gotta give it some gas in order to get up the hill. And in the vocal context, the gas that we're using, it's our breath support. A lot of times we're not taking deep enough breaths. We're not using our abdominal to really project our voice the way that we should. So I'd like to focus on these techniques in particular when it comes to the changing voice. And the bottom line is sometimes they need to know it's not their fault, that they have a stronger, we were talking about that sense of vocal gravity. Sometimes their vocal gravity is more intense than the other person in their section. And knowing that is helpful. It's like, okay, like different people have different talents and different challenges in life, and that's okay. What are you going to do about it, right? It's not your fault, but now the ball's in your court. Let's see what you can do to overcome that, right? This is another short little clip, and I'll just play it here.
We're trying out
and I'm going to mute it because I'm going to explain to show you what is being seen. I like using this. You're seeing this on a phone, but I like using this on my iPad. So I have my iPad mirrored through my Apple TV to the projector in my room, and I will use this decibel meter. And what's cool about it is it has, similar to the Ulean decibel meter that we saw that you can use on Chromebooks or other devices. This is just an app that I like to use for the whole class. And it's showing the decibel meter. It's showing the peak decibel meter as well. Sorry, the max. And it's also showing the average on this decibel meter app. And it's called the Decibel 10th application. But there's a bunch of these decibel applications available, for your phone, so you can mirror your phone if you know how to do that in your classroom, or your iPad, which is what I really like to do. And so our final wrap up here. So how do we inspire our students who are in the middle of their vocal change? Their achievement is not limited to a quarterly grade. This is so important. We can go into a whole long discussion about how we grade, and everyone has their own approaches to it. But their achievement, every time they come into a classroom, like for me, whether they get the point, the daily point or not, that doesn't matter. Are they improving? Every time that they're using their voice, they're achieving something. And we need to highlight that like, I say this frequently to my students, grades, numerical grades are a poor indicator of success and achievement. Man, I put that on a plaque in our schools, because people think, especially in the modern day education system, regardless of what, music is being taught, there's people who think that the higher GPA they have, that will ultimately equal like success in life. And we need to tell them like, hey, you know what, that can be, go for, use the talents that God has blessed you with, like use the intellect and whatever it is that you've been endowed with. But the reality is, just because you get good grades or just because you get lower grades, that doesn't necessarily guarantee success. For sure, there's correlations there, but that's not the ultimate goal. And especially, that's an awesome conversation to have with our students, especially when it comes to the changing voice. And some middle schoolers like being weird when it comes to inspiring our students who are in the middle of a vocal change, and some don't. Like you saw, I was talking about how that, experimenting with our mask voice. There's some middle schoolers who are going to love it. The good evening, of making, funny voices to understand vocal resonance and things like that. There's some students who will be like, Mr. G, this is weird, right? And they won't, and that's okay. But I think we do need to take advantage of the willingness of our students who they like to be eccentric and energetic and to do funny things in a choral rehearsal. Because again, the culture matters in our choral programs. And this is I could do a whole a whole speech on this, but exclusivity is powerful. It might be one of the greatest things that helped me to build my own choral program. Is we had, maybe you have auditioned choirs. We have an auditioned chamber choir, and when I took over that chamber choir, it was like no one wanted to be in it, and it was dwindling numbers. And what I did is I understand that there's low numbers here, but we changed it into an audition process where students need to audition. Now they didn't know this, but I was pretty much ready to take everyone into the group. But the idea, because it was exclusive, there was something to achieve, a goal to be reached. All of a sudden, the students who were trying to get into the chamber choir, the caliber of the students who decided like, I'm going to audition, all of a sudden it elevated the overall level of the group. And because the group is elevated, now we had better students who were in the program, and we had more students who wanted to be in the program just because it was exclusive. So exclusivity is powerful when it comes to inspiring our students who are in the middle of a vocal change. And we want to contextualize our vocal technique. We want to make it relevant. I think a lot of choir directors, we all have our own personal preferences, whether it's, musical theater for you, or, I happen to like, heavier styles of rock. I like gospel choirs. I like, there's a whole range of singing styles that we like. We need to contextualize that and show them examples, show our choirs that there's a wide range of vocal techniques that are out there. And no matter if you're, the most popular pop artist, or, a nobody in a choir that no one's ever heard of, you can still make vocal production relevant by examining different styles of singing. And it's a great way to inspire our students, because the reality is, as diverse as our tastes are in music, man, our students today have a huge range of different styles of music that they're into. And it's just a great way to, again, inspire our students. So I want to leave you with this question again is, what is your context? What is your context for your ensemble, for your choirs? And how can you use these ideas of vocal gravity, of inspiring our students to project their voice who are in the middle of this vocal change? What is your context, and how can you, maybe you want to try some of these tools? Check out the, MatthewGronsky.com/note namer. Give it a shot with your own students. Experiment on ways. If you feel, and every choir director feels like this from time to time, like, man, I wish I could help this student because they have a 2 or 3 note range, and I wish that I can help them in the middle of their vocal change. Keep that dialogue open. Stay positive. Use some of these tools. There are so many things that we can do as choir directors, if you'd give it a shot. And I want to encourage you out there. Thank you for what you do. Choir music matters on a deep and profound level, and the opportunities that we have to share music in such a way, even in this daunting time of vocal change, even though it's difficult, it has its own challenges. What an opportunity that we have to have these technological tools that can help us to reach those students who are in those precarious positions. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me, Matt@MatthewGronsky.com. Check out that MatthewGronsky.com/note namer. And you know what? Let me show you one other thing. I think it's the next slide here. Before we wrap up, yeah. So this is a QR code. You could scan this with your phone. This is a recent piece I wrote called Viento. And if you scan this QR code, it's going to actually allow you to download a preview of the SAB version of this piece. And how this relates to the changing voice is, this is a piece that I wrote in order to encourage those other male vocalists who had a very limited range to participate. And what I love about it, viento means wind in Spanish. And we do this whole thing with this performance on viento, where we're creating the sounds of the wind. And it's a great way to get students who maybe have a limited vocal range to still participate in choir. You're going to lead us in these wind sounds. You're going to help us with that. And also being mindful of the vocal ranges in choral arrangements. That's just another thing. So I figured I would share that with you. Again, you could just, scan this on your phone with the camera app on your phone, and follow that QR code. And there's a link there where you could just download that Viento SAB. It's a preview. And it's actually, I think this piece was picked up by Bry Lee, depending on when you're watching this video, should be coming out in the next couple months in print, or you could download the whole PDF for purchase, where you can reproduce it, and there's a bunch of different vocal settings. You could watch a video performance of it on my website. But this is just another way that I found to again encourage students who are in the middle of that vocal change, is let's have different ways that they can make sounds with through their mouth, is to make sounds of the wind, whatever it is. In any case, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was informative for you. Go out there and reach our students. You can do this. We can really make our students comfortable and confident singers, even when they're in the midst of these difficult vocal changes. So thanks again for watching.